I am all by myself. Can I handle it? I don't. You want to come up and help me? All right. All of a sudden, a handful of people walk out. All right. Test, test, test. Shelly, just want to make sure you can hear her. You let me know if not. She's our online guide of all things, because there's a Zoom, so somebody has to run the Zoom, so Shelly's at home running the Zoom. It's always complicated. Yeah, so I recorded it. I have to look at it. I don't know whether it's going to be of particularly great quality, but at the very least, you should be able to hear everything. So I have to just get it from my phone onto YouTube, and I'll do it as a private thing, so just, people who ask for it can get it. But yeah, but for sure, I'll send it to you, or I'll try to think what the best way to do this is. I might send the link to Eileen and then whoever, but for you, I'll send because I know you would have been there otherwise. But yeah, that was really, I'm, you'd think I would. Oh, sorry, I left you hanging. So what happens is when you have Pesach and you have a situation where it begins on Friday night and the second night Seder, right? So it would be continuing through. So you have, I forget what it's called. It's sort of like a pilot light, but you are supposed to light candles for Shabbat before Pesach begins. You just don't light it. Yeah. Yeah, but in our case, like if you're asking me, like what we would do, it would be the beginning of the Seder, would generally be the way to approach it. Because the thing is, like, technically speaking, you're still supposed to go to shul, right? So, Orthodox, they're going to go to shul and then they're going to come home. But normally, what they do is they light candles before they go to shul. Yeah. So, but it's it's a very interesting thing about how candle lighting came to be a Shabbat mitzvah and stuff. It's not what most people think. No, I know, but it is interesting. It is interesting, right? It's not. Yeah, but but that's it. What shall we say? I'll be around Monday. Yes. Yeah, I will be around Monday. Yeah. I will be there, although I have now that I think about it. Yeah. 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 No, for sure. All right. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Believe it or not, it's 6 o'clock. It sort of always throws me off with how bright it is. You know, it's still like in this room, it is truly, truly beautiful. But as you can see, just me this evening, but not just me here in the room. Got our wonderful friends. We got all of our friends watching at home. So we're going to jump right in. We're just going to start with our candle lighting. That's on page 120. So if you want to join us, again, page 120. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. That's the amen part for you guys. All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to jump right into Kabbalat Shabbat, starting on page 130 at the very top of the page. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena, ladonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena, ladonai. Naria, Naria, letzor yishenu nekadma fanav betoda. Naria, Naria, letzor yishenu bizmirot Naria lo. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena, ladonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena, ladonai. We'll turn now to page 131, Shiru Ladonai. Shiru Ladonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru Ladonai, Baruchu Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom, Yeshuatom, Shiru Ladonai, Baruchu Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom, Yeshuatom, Shiru Ladonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru Ladonai, Baruchu Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom, Yeshuato, Shiru Ladonai, Baruchu Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom, Yeshuato. We'll turn now to page 132, or Zarua at the very bottom of the page. Or Zarua la tzadik, v'leishrei lev simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik, v'leishrei lev simcha. Simechu tzadikim b'Adonai, vehodu lezecher kodsho. Simechu tzadikim b'Adonai, vehodu lezecher kodsho. We'll turn now to page 134, Zamru Ladonai, beginning at the top of the page. Zamru Ladonai bechinor, bechinor bekol zimram, b'chatzotzrot bekol shofar. Hariu lifnei hamelech Adonai, Iram hayamum lo. tevel veyoshveva. Neharot yimchahu chaf yachad, harim yiraneinu. Lifnei Adonai kiva, lishbot haaretz, yishbot tevel betzedek, vehamim mesharim. Yiram hayamum lo, tevel veyoshveva. Neharot yimchahu chaf yachad, harim yiraneinu. We'll turn now to page 135. Romamu is the last Hebrew paragraph in the middle of the page. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu vehishtachavu lehakodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu vehishtachavu lehakodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu vehishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu vehishtachavu lehar kodsho. We'll turn now to page 138 for Lechado D. Reminder, we'll do the first, second, fifth, and ninth paragraphs, and for the final paragraph, we will rise and face towards the rear of the room, the door we walk through. Lechado di likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor bezachor bedibur echad, Ishmianu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad, Ushemo echad, L'shemu tiferet velitila. Lechado di likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lechado di likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelecha, ki mekor haberacha, merosh mikedem nesucha, sof maaseh b'machshavat tchila. Lechado di likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lechado di likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Fifth paragraph. Hitoreri, ki va'orech kumiori, uri, shir dahaberi, kevod Adonai alayich nigla. Lechado di likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lechado di likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Boi v'shalom ateret bala, gam besimcha uvetzola, toch emunei am segula, Boi chala, lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela, lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Okay, please be seated. I appreciate the energy, guys. I appreciate the clapping. Neil, you were ready to dance. I could see that. You were ready to go. You were ready to go. You're dancing to the future. You know, that's where. Yes, that's something like that. All right, we'll turn now to page 140, and we'll turn again to the middle of the page, right where it indents Tzadik Katamar. Tzadik Katamar Yifrach Keres Bavanun Yiskem Shetulim Bevet Adonai Bechatzrot Eloheinu Yafrichu Od Yenuvun Beseva Deshenim Verananim Yehu Lehagin Ki Hashar Adonai Tzuri Velo Hablatabo. We'll rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 144 for the Chatzi Kaddish. Yitkada v'yitkada shemei rabam be'alma divrach yirtei be'amlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'v'izman kariv v'imeru. Amen. Yeshmei rabba mevarach le'ahalam li'al me'al maya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekudsha brichu le'la min kol birchata v'shirata tushmechata v'nechemata damiran behalmam v'imeru. Amen. Turn for the Baruch Hu on page 146. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vaed. Please be seated. I think you're sounding good. You're sounding good. All right, we're going to turn to page 148. We'll read together in English at the bottom of the page. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzvaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening. Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila, Adonai Tzvaot shemo. El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, Amaharim Arhavim. We'll turn now to page 150, and we'll read together in English at the bottom of the page. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel, by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Ki ehem chayenu ve'orech yameinu, v'hem nege yomav v'layla, v'avatcha al tasir mimenu li'olamim, baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Please join me on page 154. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele Asher anochi metzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinatam lebanecha v'dibarta bam v'shiftecha v'veitecha u'v'lechtecha v'derech v'shochbecha u'kumecha v'gshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot beninecha u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha Leman tiskeru vasitem et kol mitzvotai v'item kedoshim leloechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem lelohim ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem emet. Let's read together on the top of page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. As we turn to page 158, Mi Chamocha at the top of the page. Ya bye bye bim 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 bam, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye bye bim 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 bam, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye ba 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 ba, ya bye bim bam, ya bye ba 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 ba, ya bye bim bam. Mi chamocha bailim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'hakodesh. Nor hatehilot osefele, nor hatehilot osefele. Malchutecha ra'u vanecha, bokeam lifnei Moshe Miriam, zeli anu ve'amru, Adonai imloch leolam va'ed, v'nemar kifad Adonai et Yaakov, Ugolo miad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up, waiting to do your will. Hashkibenu, page 160. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leShalom v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leShalom v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Ushmor tzeiteinu, umoecheinu, lechaim u'shalom, me'ata ve'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leShalom, v'hamidenu shomereinu lechaim. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Yerushalayim. We turn now to page 162, V'shamru, at the very top of the page. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. עיני בעיני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת vayinafash. I'll invite those in our room and those watching at home to rise in either body or spirit. We'll begin the Abidah together on page 164 and then continue silently. As always, please go at your own pace, and if you're standing, you may be seated at the end. Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Ose shalom bimromav, uyase shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Yase shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yase shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. We'll turn now to page 371 in preparation for our Mishaberach, our healing prayer. In a moment I'll read our Mishaberach list, but of course we will extend our hearts and our minds and our prayers, of course, to the people of Ukraine, but also to our brothers and sisters living in Israel after yet another week with a terrorist act. Another 2 lives taken. So we extend, again, outward in that way. But we also think tonight within our community of Roberta Kyle, Rivka Bat Yehuda Vebela, Eve Rose, Michoel Ben Chananya, David Kyle Klotman, Bentzi Tepper, Samuel Moskowitz, Devorah Batsima, Michael Klinghoffer, Norma Paulsack, Jane Beard Cass, Amy Cass, Steve Levine, Rivka Bat Rachel, Gail Gambino, Leah Bat Naomi, Gedalia Ben Sylvia, Lorraine Danis, David Dowling, Tzibia Devora Bat Francis, and Myra Peskowitz. In addition to the names we mentioned, for those that are in the room with us tonight, if you have additional names to share, we'll start on this side of the room and work towards the back, and then it means right on it. If you have a name to share, just please raise a hand. I'll invite those at home, of course, to say the names of your loved ones as well, and we'll join together in Mishaberach prayer in the middle of page 371. Mishaberach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Hey, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's not just any Shabbat. Does anybody know what the name of this Shabbat is? Very good, Jack. Very good. Okay, if you couldn't hear Jack, which you probably couldn't hear on the camera, Shabbat HaGadol. Does anybody know what that means? The big one. Okay, so we know Gadol. Okay, Gadol means large of some sort. Okay, so now the real important question. Why is it called Shabbat HaGadol? Pesach. Okay, so Jack says Pesach. But why this of all things, right? Pesach is not our only holiday by any means. Right, so why would we, and it's not even Pesach yet. So if it's Shabbat HaGadol, it's really actually just any other Shabbat. Any other thoughts? Well, I'm not surprised because it's not as obvious as you would think. And of course, like most things in Judaism, there's actually like 17 different rationales for why it's the case. So tonight I'm going to share the one that I think actually is really actually quite compelling and something that I think actually will have a lot of introduction for a short teaching, but one that I don't know. It struck me as really quite lovely. So, as Jack taught us, right, the Shabbat HaGadol, the Shabbat preceding Pesach, is always referred to as Shabbat HaGadol. It's part of a number of different Shabbats throughout the year that get a special designation. In reality, there's not a whole lot different about tomorrow's service, or certainly nothing different about tonight's service. And the only real change that takes place is that there is a special haftarah that's read that comes from the prophet Malachi. But there is one other piece of it which I'm going to save you from, which is that it's traditional on the Shabbat afternoon for the rabbi to give, or somebody to give, a very long and often complicated drasha, a teaching of some sort, that has to do some form or another with Pesach, but these are things that back in the day were actually really quite popular. People would come, they'd be excited about it, and they'd listen to the rabbi teach for an hour and a half or 2 hours or something like that on a Saturday afternoon. I'm not going to do that to all of you tonight, and I'm not going to do it to you tomorrow. Neil is very relieved to hear that. But I'm going to try to give you at least something that, as I said, will connect us to this idea of Shabbat HaGadol. So, the first thing to understand, and this is probably going to be a surprise to all, what do you think the first mitzvah, the first actual commandment there is in the Torah? What would you guess? Interesting. Okay, so that's the first statement, sure, certainly, right? But as an actual commandment, right? You shall do something. Okay, so Shabbat as a first, that's a good guess. Certainly would make sense. Any other guesses? Okay. Look, this one I think you at least should have had some answer, which is think of the Ten Commandments, right? Your first guess would probably be the first of the Ten Commandments. Makes perfect sense. The reality is it's not, at least according to rabbinic tradition. Really, it actually comes much early on, before the Israelites have even left Egypt, believe it or not. And it relates to the 10th of Nisan, 5 days before the Israelite Exodus, before it even begins. So in the book of Exodus, chapter 12, there is initially a conversation. The truth is, I'll tell you the answer ahead of time. The commandment about creating a Jewish calendar, and in particular celebrating the new month, is really technically the first commandment. But it's not actualized yet. It's a sort of saying when the next month comes. So the first acted upon commandment in the Torah is when we are told on the 10th day of the month of Nisan, that is this month, each person should take a lamb from their household, a lamb for each home, right, that is connected. And that is the main idea. And does anybody remember what happens to this poor lamb? Right, the famous Paschal lamb, as it were. Right, the blood is put over the lintel. It's the thing that acts as a protective so that the Malach HaMavet, the angel of darkness, doesn't take the lives of the Israelite firstborn as it takes the Egyptians. But this commandment to take this lamb and to prepare it is, technically speaking, the first commandment, the first thing that we are supposed to do. So while that, of course, is probably a surprise to all of us, let me then connect it to why we have Shabbat HaGadol and why this really matters. And for this, we're going to rely upon a rabbi who I would be really surprised if any of you had ever heard of, Hezekiah de Silva. Anybody? No, I didn't think so. So Hezekiah de Silva, as you can hear in his name, right, I'm sure you're also surprised probably to know, right, that there are de Silva Jews running around all over the world, but in reality, he came from Livorno, from the Grand Duchy of Tuscany. He was born in the mid-1600s, 1659. He lived to about 1698, almost to the turn of that century. And he turned out to become quite a remarkable and important rabbinic presence. He eventually finds himself in Amsterdam. He sort of travels around the world. He writes what becomes his most significant book that is known as the Pri Chadash. Pri is the word for fruit, and Chadash is new, so a new fruit of some sort or another. It's a commentary on a very important halachic work that I taught you about not so long ago, called the Shulchan Aruch. Everybody remember a few weeks ago? Maybe yes or no? And so it's a commentary of one of the sections of it known as Yoredea. And in the end, the community in Amsterdam were so moved by this work, they thought it was so important, that they, and the Amsterdam Jewish community at the time, was really quite wealthy and oftentimes would fund certain kinds of things, including a publication. Again, this is pretty early on in the world of printing. And so again, in 1691, the Amsterdam Jewish community published the Pri Chadash, and it immediately became a well-respected rabbinic discourse and was used by European Torah scholars all over the continent, and in the end was considered at the time a major work of halakha. And then he decides, for some reason, on his way back, he's going to go to Israel, but he goes through Egypt. And when he goes into Egypt, he is treated very differently because they don't appreciate the fact that he, in his work, took some shots actually at the Shulchan Aruch and said basically some things that, basically challenged its authoritative nature. So they, of course, didn't really appreciate that, and in fact, basically banned the book and, treated him basically in a very unkind manner, to say the very least, until really a few generations later, a latter rabbi in the Egyptian Jewish community took that away. But basically, he was sort of considered a little bit of a pariah, depending on who you were talking to. And again, even though it was originally controversial, in history, the Pri Chadash is really considered actually to be very, very important. So all of that is just introduction to what is the teaching I want to share for tonight. So what is the Pri Chadash, right? What does it have to do with this idea of Gadol? He says that it's really on this day, on this Shabbat HaGadol, the Jewish people were commanded to fulfill, as I said, their first mitzvah, to set aside the lamb as a sacrifice, right? And forget the Rosh Chodesh piece of it. Now, what is this about? This significant achievement is therefore called Gadol. So their first mitzvah, as it's done, is considered a Gadol thing. Now, here's where it gets more interesting. He says, additionally, by fulfilling this first mitzvah, they became like a child maturing into adulthood. What would we call that in our tradition? Yes, definitely a teenager, for sure. But, I think in this room, Howard probably is the most recent of experiencing this. But, right, what did your two wonderful sons do not so long ago? Bar mitzvah, okay? Bar mitzvah. So in our minds, right, we associate bar mitzvah as an event. as a thing, as a big party or whatever it might be. But the reality is, what is a bar bat mitzvah? A bar bat mitzvah, to become a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, you just simply have to live to an age, to the age of 13 as a boy and traditionally 12 as a girl. You don't have to do anything else. The moment that the clock ticks, whatever it is, to transform you into that age, you become officially a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah. The celebration of that fact is what we now associate with a bar or bat mitzvah. But the actual fact itself is it's the first time that you are old enough to actually fulfill the commandments yourself. And the celebration part is to celebrate the fact that a young person, like, for example, Marcus or, Max, as they came up to read from the Torah, it was the first time that they were allowed to do the blessings and to read from the Torah, and we celebrated that fact. And what happens is that in, Jewish legal terminology, does anybody know the word for a minor? Katan, right? Small. Yeah, so the word for a major, okay, and I know Jack's our expert legal force here, right? In the legal terminology, right, a major is a gadol. So what happens when you become a bar bat mitzvah is you become, instead of a katan, you become a gadol. So in essence, right, this first holiday, or this first Shabbat, as we call it, of gadol, is really about a callback to the first fulfilling of the first mitzvah, the first commandment that God gives to the nascent Jewish people. And this Shabbat is meant to be a celebration of our people moving from a sense of sort of childlikeness into adulthood. So what does this mean to all of us, right, in this room? How many of us, had bar bat mitzvahs, how long ago they may be, right? It's my bar mitzvah talis, I still wear it all the time, right? But we tend to think of bar bat mitzvah, I think, probably in the wrong fashion, okay? And we tend to think probably of a Shabbat like this, of Shabbat HaGadol, in the wrong fashion. We just look at it as something that we sort of do when we pass through, and then next year it comes and the same thing happens over and over again. But I want to take this idea of what really, De Silva is talking about here, right? What is he writing about? What is he really trying to tell us? What is our mindset supposed to be on Shabbat HaGadol? It's trying to get into the mindset of somebody who is doing, right, their first real experience, their first real Jewish experience at all, right? The first time that they fulfill a mitzvah. To have that kind of image in your mind of what it means to be in that space, as opposed to those of us who are sitting in the room tonight. Let's just say we've done more than a few of them over the years, right? We're further away from that first experience than closer to it, to put it lightly. Okay, so our mentality as adults, as we get older, is we get further and further from that childlike experience, right? From that sense of what it means to be transmitting ourselves from this, childlike existence in which we're not really responsible for our own behaviors, our own life, our own anything, and then suddenly taking on that responsibility, which is both joyful, as Shabbat HaGadol is meant to be, right? It's meant to be joyful, but it's also meant to be contemplative, right? It's meant to make us think, and it's in particular meant to help us prepare ourselves for Pesach. Pesach is not a simple holiday, okay? And most of us at this point, we do the Seder, and that's kind of our own thinking about it. But the reality is it's our most important holiday in so many different ways. It's the moment in which we become really a nation, in which we become a real people, not just a single family. It is the time in which we are meant to reflect on how far we have ultimately come from those days of slavery. It's meant to draw our attention to other people who are suffering in the world in a way in which our ancestors suffered. It requires, for those of us that observe, a meticulous checking of your home, right? Not just to, get rid of things, but you're supposed to really check every corner, get every piece of chametz out of your house. It's not something that you can just rush into, as much as we may think that we can. So we get this Shabbat prior, really to celebrate, but also, I think, to really push ourselves to think more along the lines of how would we approach this year's Pesach as if it was our first one, right? How would we approach it as if it's the first time that we're ever celebrating the holiday? And obviously, this year is less challenging as a Pesach as last year or 2 years ago, certainly. But we all are still coming into it with, I think, a great amount of challenge, of tsuris, of things that are going on that are going to try as best as they can to pull our attention away. And yet, at the same time, I don't think there's ever been a time where we've needed Pesach more, where we've needed to focus more on the things that are fundamental to who we are as Jews, to focus on our families, to focus on our commitments to each other, to our communities, and to focus, again, broadly, to think about the world that we share and the impact that we're meant to have. There is an enthusiasm, at least in my experience, working with B'nai Mitzvah students. They don't yet have that sort of, cynicism that comes with doing something for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. There's something unique about that and something special. And I think if we take the pre-Chadash, right, if we take De Silva's teaching tonight, and we really try to understand what he's talking about, to really treat this Shabbat as something to, sort of emulate that first mitzvah, that celebration of, and that image really, again, of what freedom results from that, I think can be really quite powerful. So I hope that you learned at least a couple of things tonight, and I think that all of us hopefully will go into this next week of preparation with a seriousness, and also at the same time with an anticipation and hopefully at least some amount of joy. So with that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and since I'll make the announcement again later on Friday, we don't have Friday night services next week because of the first night and Seder and everything. So I'll wish a Zisen Pesach, as they say, a celebratory Pesach to all of us. Neil has a question. That's okay. I may have answered it before. So why? Interesting. So Shabbat itself, so you're asking whether Shabbat is masculine or feminine. And as far as I know, Shabbat is a masculine word technically. So it would make sense for it to be gadol. But Hebrew is actually complicated in that things that can appear masculine are actually considered grammatically feminine and vice versa. So it's one of those... yeah, well, no. But why, I mean, I don't know what answer you're looking for exactly, but... in as far as I know, I've never heard of Shabbat Gadolah. I've only heard Shabbat as Shabbat HaGadol. But no, just keep asking me. I'll be happy to, but I will certainly look into it. Truth be told, we should ask Shelley. She's our real Hebrew expert around here for sure. But good, always ask questions, Neil. It makes me happy. What'd you say? I know. Well, I could send her a text, but there'd be something very odd about that reality, I think. So, Shelley, if anybody's on the Zoom, you can ask Shelley what she knows about it. So, on that note, again, we'll rise as we turn to page 586 at the bottom of the page, Aleinu L'Shabeach. Aleinu L'Shabeach Ladon HaKol Latet Gedula Leotze Breshit שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגורלנו ככל המונם ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. I'll now ask those in mourning and those observing yahrzeit to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated at this time. We begin by thinking of those who passed in our community in recent months. Dr. John Abdrakin, Faith Diskin, Linda Danath, Arlene Eber, Jay Fagan, Ellen Frank, Chaim Bear Greenwald, Arthur Grossman, Gerald Hirsch, Mark Joseph, Gertrude Katz, Deirdre Klein, Leo Leibowitz, William Lipman, Audrey Lubo, Sandra Luongo, Morty Lynn, Jerry Monroe, Nancy Nagel, Harry Olstein, Harriet Roth, Jeannie Rubin, Howard Schreier, David Senf, Anita Sheldon, Alan Silver, Marlise Silverberg, Blanche Sklar, Rita Snyder, Joan Strong Tangzilius, and Matthew Adam Zimmerman. We also mark the yahrzeits that occurred during the last week for Istvan Benjamin, Gloria Bennett, Steve Bergman, Hilda Berger, Rachel Chesner, Rose Younger Cohen, Edith Dobson, Woodrow Emanuel, Jacob Falk, Sandra Furman, Mildred Gauze, my grandfather, Rabbi Samuel Geffen, Murray Hertz, Max Giroux, Sylvia Kolinitsky, Milton Kelmans, Jeanette Kopp, David Krotman, Ray Meyer, Bernard Mintz, Morris Newmark, Shana Dina Kaplan-Price, Sarah Quiros Ramirez, Fanny Siegel Ratner, Lois Rosenberg, Joseph Rothbart, Julia Scavron, Sophia Schoenbach, Emily Segelstein, Max Silver, Paul Silver, Henry Spitzer, and Walter Vargas. Is there anyone else here this evening that is saying Kaddish for anyone we didn't mention? Mark Epstein. I invite those in mourning to please rise and to join me again on page 598 for the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach hirutei ve'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, b'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. V'hei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha b'richu. Le'ila min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechamata, ta'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalama Rabbah min shemaya, b'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Okay, please be seated. And again, a Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Some important announcements tonight, so let's make sure that we are paying close attention. First is to join us for Shabbat services beginning tomorrow at 9:30. A reminder again, Saturday morning services are still virtual only. You're welcome to join us on Zoom or watch the stream on our website, YouTube, or Facebook channel. Archived versions will be available shortly after each service is over, and you're welcome to join us for Torah study beginning at 12 o'clock on Zoom. On Monday, Nida Mitzvah, 9 o'clock. My Heschel class at 12 o'clock. Hebrew School is at 3:30, and Social Justice Committee has its regular meeting at 5 o'clock on Zoom as well. On Wednesday, Hebrew School is in session at 3:30, and later that evening there is a board meeting at 7:30. My Friday class will still be happening at 9:15. Journey to the Heart of the Siddur. And just a reminder that next Friday night, a week from tonight, there are no services either in person or online, since it is the first night of Pesach and everyone will very likely be at their Seders, I hope, in some form or the other. So again, no services in person next Friday night. As far as I know, there are virtual services Saturday morning, so you're welcome to join me for that. And then later that evening, of course, is our annual communal Seder. We hope this will be the last one that we have to do on Zoom, and hopefully next year we'll be doing it in our wonderful new temple. And I've got some ideas of how to actually have some good food this time, which would be really nice. But we're going to have a good time. We've actually had, I think the last two Zoom Seders have actually been really a lot of fun. You know, it opens up certain possibilities that are a little bit trickier when you're worried about the food coming. It's like one of my great anxieties from pre-COVID days was our Seder, because I always had to make sure that the timing was right, that the soup was coming up at the right time, that it wasn't going to be too cold, that the eggs were on. There were like 50 million things I was worried about other than the Seder itself. So with all of that stuff gone, and you know me, I might have a couple of tricks up my sleeve to do something a little different, a little bit interesting. It's always time to sign up. You can sign up literally until the last minute, but please do join us if you don't have a second night Seder already prepared. And again, since we won't see you, I wish everyone a Zis Pesach, a really joyful Pesach, I hope, in whatever way that we can make it. And just to highlight a few other things coming up towards the end of the month, Wednesday, April 20th at 6 o'clock, we're going to have another class by our wonderful teacher, Alan Levin, who is now a board member and on his way, getting closer by the day to being a rabbi himself. Has been teaching a great class on some of the holidays throughout the year. In this case, he's going to focus on counting the Omer, which begins from the second day of Pesach, counting all the way until Shavuot. And also a reminder that we were going to have a book talk on the 24th at 7 o'clock with the author of Accidental Gangster, Dutch Schultz and Me, which should be quite fascinating. I feel like we've had a number of, gangster-related things over the years. I'm not sure what that says about us, but hopefully something worthwhile. But that should be a great program again. That is the 24th at 7 o'clock. So beyond that, I think those are all of my announcements. Anything I missed other than, still great progress going on at the temple. Neil actually and I were there this week, so I got to walk around inside of it, and it's a real thing. It is a real thing, people. I mean, oh, great. So, as it becomes safer to be on site, we'll be able to bring some people over and get a sense of where we're going. But, it really was a powerful experience for me. It was strange, right, to be back in there and to actually be in the sanctuary even a little bit. But at the same time, it's just a realization of an incredible dream. and a lot of people again who have worked and continue to work to make it happen. So, there's a lot of things to look forward to in our future for sure. So with that, I'll wish everybody again a Shabbat Shalom, a happy Pesach, and let's see, what's a good closing song for tonight? Any requests? Yigdal. Okay, you know what, Jack? I'm doing Yigdal. I'm going to do Yigdal. This is one we actually usually do mostly Saturday mornings. We don't do it on Friday evenings a lot, but I love Yigdal. It's page 628. If you know the melody, you're more than welcome to join. Yigdal Elohim Chai V'yishtabach Nimtzav Yehenet El Metziuto Echad Ve'en Yachid Geyechudo Nelam Begam En Sof Leachduto En Lo Demut HaGuf Ve'eino Guf No Naroch Elav Kedushato Kadmon lechol davar asher nivra rishon vein reshit lereshito hino adon olam lechol notzar yoreh gedulato malchuto shefan nevuato netan hoel anshe segulato vetifarto Lo kam b'Yisrael k'Moshe od navi umabit et emunato Torah emet natan le'ahamoel al yad nevi'o ne'eman beito Lo yachalif ha'el ve'lo yamir dato le'olamim lezulato Zofeh v'yodea Zetareinu mabit lesof davar bekadmato gomer leish chesed kemifalo noten larashar kerishato yishlach leketz yamin beduhut olam kol chai v'yesh yakir yeshuato chaye olam nata betochenu Baruch Adei Ad Shem Tehilato Chaye Olam Nata Betocheinu Baruch Adei Ad Shem Tehilato. And we should note, Jack, if the last line sounded different to you, it's not accidental. Another time I'll explain how that happened, but it is one of the good examples of one of the distinctions between Reform prayer books and more traditional prayer books. Maybe that'll be a sermon for another night. But it's always a surprise. When I see anybody that knows Yigdal and they hear that line, they just kind of go like this, like what's happening. Anyway, we're going to turn now to page 123. I'll invite those in the room with us and those at home, if you'd like, to rise as we do Kiddush. Again, page 123. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon inchilanu zikaron l'maseh v'reshit Yehu yom techila l'mikrae kodesh zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim ki banu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta l'kol ha'amim V'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Amen. L'chaim and Shabbat Shalom, and again a Chag Sameach to everyone next week. Hopefully see some of you online for Shabbat, and get home safe. Okay, and then Jack, we're gonna set up, yeah? Okay, you just email it. It'll be best because then I'll have my calendar in front of me, but we'll make it happen. Anyways, all right, it's good. Yes, no, it's the only thing about gluten-free matzah is that technically speaking, you can't use it for the brachot. Like, no, it's not that you can't use it for Pesach. Is that when you're doing the commandments, right? The blessing with the commandment for eating matzah, right? It technically speaking doesn't satisfy that requirement in the most extreme circumstances. But for you and any other gluten-free person, You should use it and use it in good health. You know, this year, you know what the real challenge actually to find, I'm told, or that it's become very expensive, are eggs because of the avian flu stuff that's going around. I was going to say, so you don't have to worry about it, but it's also the confluence, right? Pesach uses eggs, Easter uses eggs, so now everybody is running to get as many eggs as they can possibly get. It's the absurdity of the world we live in, for sure, but yeah. All right, good Shabbos to everybody watching online, to Shelly and all our friends.